Good afternoon and welcome to Resolutions for Recovery. This show is really, I say it every week, dedicated to the empowerment and the education of substance use disorder. We are focused on the pandemic of heroin and opiates, but there will be a new drug any day of the week that will come along and rear its ugly head, which actually includes Xanax and Valium and the benzodiazepines. So those are that group of drugs. We have a lot of kids getting addicted there and adults. Let's be fair, we won't put it all on the children. However, in today's world, we have to arm our children with a host of other knowledge that we probably never existed for us as we were growing up, as the parents of our teenagers now and young people. So again, today, my dear friend John Venza is here, and we are really trying to help parents for the summer come into the summer armed with some education, armed with some strategies, and today we're going to talk about transitions. So welcome, John.
Anyway.
So we have transitions kindergarten to first grade. We have transitions elementary school to maybe
middle school.
Maybe a transition in my district. We have a 4 or 5 building. Okay, 4th grade, 5th grade, and then the transition into middle school, transition into high school, transition into college. Pivotal achievements for young people.
Yeah.
And for some reason, I find that parents think that once children get to the middle school, their job is kind of done. And that is the time that our kids need us, most of all. As a financial advisor and, when working with young families, everybody wants to be home with the babies because they're so much fun and they're the cutest and they don't talk back. However, if you ever have a chance or the option of when to go to work and when to stay home, sometimes the better time to stay home is as they 9, 10, 11, 12. That's the important years to be home, to be monitoring behavior.
Yeah, those transitions, when you look at substance use, major transitions like shifting schools or moving to a different neighborhood, those are high risk periods for young people to begin substance use. And if you think about it, all of us, whether adults or young people, we don't like change that much. We like to know what's happening. We like to know the outcome. And for kids, they don't have the same coping strategies and resources that we have as an adult.
Correct.
So they struggle with that. And, like it or not, people have to understand that drug use, substance use is a coping strategy. It's an unhealthy coping strategy.
Correct.
But for some young people, they reach for it because it still is a coping strategy. And that's why the substance use is so connected to these transitionary periods. And I think, you mentioned the elementary school to the middle school. We used to just talk about the high school, and then we used to talk about a little bit about 8th grade, but now we're talking about middle school and elementary school because the average age of first-time alcohol use is something like 11 and a few months. So to get an average of 11 and a few months, you have to have some numbers that are lower than 11, which are probably 10, 9, 8 in certain areas and whatnot. And so when do you begin that conversation? And it's very, it's not funny, but it's kind of a chuckle in that I was doing a public speaking piece at a high school a while back. There was probably close to 1,000 parents in there, and there were kids in the audience as well. And one parent interrupted me and said, "You're teaching the kids." And I said, "Excuse me, I'm going to hold the questions till later." He said, "No, you're teaching it." So I said, listen, I said, one thing we know about prevention is information is not the enemy.
Correct.
I said, does your child have a cell phone? Does your child have internet? Then you know what? Use this as a teachable moment because they're already aware of this stuff.
They are so, and I always say, for us, when you think, especially when I see a young person like 9, 10, 11, 12, they know so much more than we ever give them credit for. But you're looking at a baby and you don't want to believe that they have the knowledge that they do. But the knowledge is there. And they laugh to themselves in their own little groups. My parents are so stupid. They think I'm innocent.
And when they still look more like a child and less like that teen or emerging young adult, Yeah,
Yeah.
it's an extra kind of facade, and I think what's so important is different than 30 years ago. Now the kids that sell are friends selling to other kids.
Yes.
The dealer is no longer like in the 70s or 80s that couple people in the whole
That
high school that
scary-
were kind of that you had
right,
to approach.
or that
This is
scary person that came with-
This is
yeah.
all friends selling to friends right now.
Yes.
And I think also the other thing that kept kids away from drugs for a much longer window of time was that there was a fear of the unknown. They really didn't know. There was really a lot of fear associated with it. And the first time they actually would see the drug was when they probably used it. Now, kids are able to get blogging experiences about other people's
Yes.
use. They're able to see videos of people under the influence of it. They're able to see in high definition what the drug looks like. They're able to see in high definition, how you use the drug, what route of administration. So basically, what all of these things do through
All
through
the
media,
angst came out of it.
all the angst goes away. The fear drops. Now it's kind of like you've done everything but actually do it. So you're a little bit desensitized. So the nervousness and the fear, it goes away, and kids are more willing,
not
more likely
unknown
to try.
anymore. Correct.
Yeah.
Plus, they never things that will never change. Young people never think that something's going to happen to them.
Yeah.
They're bulletproof.
Yeah.
And if it's on the internet, it must be true.
Yeah. Yeah. Because
There's a certain amount of that goes along with it.
Sure.
They're never nobody's ever going to, their peers are not going to post the negative connotation of what happened to them.
Right. And remember, teenagers, right? They want to make it work for them in justifying and rationalizing why they're using. So they'll take the facts off the internet that work for them, and they'll make
Yes.
their case. And they're doing their job as a
Just
teenager,
like adults also, though. Adults
Sure.
will, we never want to hear negative things about
No.
whatever the decision. When you want to rationalize a decision,
Yeah.
you will rationalize a decision.
Yeah. So here's an important one for any parent that's watching this show. We're talking about transitions. We talked last week about the summertime coming, and we know that the summer times during these transitionary periods are the peak risk periods. A little fact, about 3,200 kids a day nationally try pot for the first time. 3,200 a day nationally. Now
So
that's-
the summer is 60 days. Let's call it 60 days.
Yeah. So there's a very good chance that 180,000 maybe
Yeah.
kids, maybe 180,000 kids over the course of the summer across this country. And, there's no other formula besides that about who will be that one person.
We don't know, you never know who that one person
Right.
is going to be, and you never know that one person
Right.
that has the disease of addiction ready
Yeah.
for that switch to be engaged.
Yeah. Well, it's very interesting because when you talk about, and I know you do a lot of work on the prevention side.
Yes.
And we talk about prevention, and we talk about the field and the study of resiliency. Resiliency is what? The ability to bounce back from adversity. And every child has innate resiliency, right?
Yes.
And it's just a matter of what's going to tap their resiliency. Well, unfortunately, every child has the risk for substance use depending on the factors. But some kids are at higher risk.
Yes.
And what you're speaking about is
That higher risk.
Who is that child that has that inside there? And what are we going to tap? The resiliency, or somehow that latent substance use waiting to show its ugly head? Is that going to be
I
tapped
would
first?
rather see children
Yeah.
practice their resiliency and the ability to say, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
That's unhealthy for me.
Yeah.
And if you don't want me to be your friend anymore,
Right.
I'm good with that.
Yeah.
I'll go my way.
Yeah.
Or if you want to do that at another time
Yeah.
and we can still all be friends,
Yeah.
instead of having to make excuses for leaving that group.
And really important with that resiliency, one of the most important protective factors when we talk about resiliency that we can find for a young person is a healthy, caring relationship with a healthy adult role model. So the moms and dads watching the show
go-to-
here,
go-to person.
Yeah, the moms and dads watching the show here, maybe when they were younger, it was easy for the parent to be that healthy, appropriate adult role model, and they still will be. But when they start to hit the adolescent years, you know, who can we connect them to? Is it their martial arts teacher? Is it their dance instructor? Is it their piano instructor? Is it their coach in their youth league? But we want to make sure we're surrounding these young people with healthy adult role models as a protective factor.
And no parent should ever feel threatened by them feeling closer. You know, adolescent years is a transition years in general, and they are pulling away. They don't want to sever their ties with you, but they need to become autonomous.
Yes.
You know, so it's a very what a great testament to whoever is their go-to person.
Yeah.
My younger son, Andrew, always had his wrestling coach,
Right.
who was even there with him through my son's death. I mean, you know, that he showed him what it meant to be a healthy man.
Yeah,
And to stand on your own 2 feet.
And you're absolutely correct. Parents shouldn't worry about those role models, getting that relationship with them. It actually works for you, because then you can be that parent in a different way and not have as many of those conflicts. Listen, truth be told, on more than one occasion, I've picked up the phone to one of my daughter's coaches and say, listen, A, B, and C is going on. I'm dad right now, and I don't want to touch it. I'm going to stay away from it. No problem, I got this. And you know what?
Same thing with me. That's how I worked with Coach Magnani. And said, you know, this is what's going on. And, you know, I got him. Don't worry about it. I don't need to know what they discuss. I need to trust their go-to person.
As we say in treatment, trust the process.
Trust the process. You don't have to have all the information.
But, you know, I know we were talking about strategies before we came on the show, and clearly a strategy is to get your child involved with that caring, appropriate adult, healthy role model, because that's a protective factor, and that in and of itself can help insulate them from the substance use, you know, because
religious, you know, in your community, there's so many sectors in your community, and we need to be community-minded parents, and parent not in our silos anymore. Be, you know, it does truly take a village to raise a child. Right.
And I think when folks begin to kind of say, you know what, it's easier to do it with others rather than myself. You know, and that's, again, you know, we tell young people in treatment all the time, hey, you got into this place on your own, and maybe with the help of others, you'll get out of here, right? And that's really the idea, is the community as a healer. The community as a healer in the community that you live in, the community as a healer in the community at Outreach House. You know, that community is considered the community of their peers, and that the power of the community and the healing that goes on from one another is equally as powerful as what happens in the individual counseling session. So when we talk about community as healing, I think what you're talking about is, so what about the communities they live in? Long before we need maybe a treatment program, but how do we keep them safe there?
You know, for me too, you know, and I'm sure for you, but when you have a girls' night out and you're just with other women that lift other women up, what a great experience to be able to share whatever you need to share. And have it heard in a different way than maybe your significant other. And that's very healthy, it's very normal. But, you know, who do you go to? You know, when if you have a best friend, it's always your best friend that knows you better than your family members sometimes. You share differently with. And so it's not a competition. It should be used all in conjunction. Ultimately, mom and dad are still the #1 heroes.
Sure. Yeah, and I think, you know, another little strategy for moms and dads also, because when we start getting into this tenuous spot, when we know drugs and alcohol and other risk behaviors are possibilities, they're now in the realm of the young person's choices. You know, parents try real hard to position themselves to have the dialogue in the right way. And I think a very simple sort that parents may want to try sometimes with their kids is to ask them, when they're having a dialogue, to ask them, hey, do you want direction or feedback on this, or do you just want me to listen? Because sometimes kids just want to be heard, and other times they're looking for guidance and direction. But I think it's, for parents, the primary go-to is always to give direction, to problem solve, to fix, because it's counterintuitive to let your kid wrestle and struggle. So we go to fix, but sometimes the teenager, they don't want that. They just want to be heard. So I've coached many a parent to just ask that fork in the road question. You just want me to listen, or are you looking for feedback and direction?
It's not easy to listen because you may hear something you don't want to hear,
Yes.
but
Yes.
you also build those muscles in your son, daughter,
Yeah.
to make decisions in
Yeah.
a healthy way by speaking it out loud. Because sometimes an idea heard
Yeah.
out loud
Yeah.
instead of just in your mind,
Yeah.
you'll end up saying, well, that sounds stupid. You know, that doesn't sound like
Yeah.
that's going to work.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, or, you know, because you can just,
Yeah, and you know, and it's also, you know, during the adolescent years when you talked about becoming that autonomous adult, that's the whole journey. You know, they leave childhood, they got to land in adulthood, and adolescence is the bridge in between.
yeah.
And you know, their job is to push parents away a little bit so they can kind of become that autonomous adult, and parents are desperately trying to hold on. And I think, you know, that's what creates the tension and the conflict very
Yeah.
often. But I think the thing that we have to remember as adults is, you know, they have the ability to now think like adults, but they just haven't had the years of practice yet.
correct.
So as much as they want to posture themselves as knowing more and understanding more, well, yeah, but I think it's just about letting the rope out just a little bit at a time and not too much. And I think that's a tough one because they'll fight for the freedom. They'll fight for...
They will fight for the freedom, but they also happen to love to still be in the box.
Correct.
They just want that, they need the box to get a little bit bigger,
Well-
and that gradual, you know,
Well,
enlargement of their freedom.
Well, you know, and yeah, they like to be in the box. They like to know still that the adult is still acting like the adult in the house.
Yes.
And deep down inside, it's got to feel really unsafe for a kid when their parent is allowing them to have alcohol and have parties in the backyard or the basement. They may like it in the moment because they can invite all their friends
Yes.
over and be popular, but deep down inside, the safety is starting to erode for that child, and the adult's not acting like the adult. And you know, it was very interesting the other day. I don't know how I got on the topic with my 17-year-old daughter, and we were just talking about some of that. It was another alcohol, drug conversation, and she said to me, she says, "I like the fact that our house is known as the house where you can't have any alcohol at it." And I said, "That's pretty cool." I said,
that is
I'm
pretty cool.
glad to hear that, you know. And it was a really kind of random thing, but it definitely told me that her and all their friends and everybody, they kind of know whose house you can do what at and where
Yeah.
at, and who's got reputations for houses that you can't do it at. And you know, I think moms, dads, again, as you're watching this, these kids are very well networked. They get it. That comment was a very random comment. It was a very genuine comment, but it also, at listening as a clinician at a deeper level, tells me that the kids have the playbook. They know which houses you can go to where. And guess what? So do you. You want to know which houses.
Absolutely. So
yeah.
sometimes you need to shut up and listen.
Yeah,
It's really difficult to listen
Yeah.
when you know, and sometimes, so now my youngest is just turned 23, so much further along, but even in the last 5 years, say, it's very difficult to hear, and I've said back to him, sometimes when I hear you speak, my initial reaction is that you're a 2-year-old and you're going to run in front of a truck, and it's my job to pull you back. So very interestingly, my son said to me, have some faith in the man that you raised. I know what's dangerous, and I can navigate.
Yeah.
Very scary to let go, especially after what
Yeah.
both of us have been through.
Yeah.
A little scary to let go then, because the protection comes out even more.
Yeah.
But sometimes,
Yeah.
you know, it's not how many times we get knocked down, it's how many times we get back up.
Yeah.
Our kids need to stumble a little bit. You want them stumbling more healthy
Yeah.
than you want them stumbling through substance use disorder.
Yeah, and all of this leads up to that transition. What about that transition when they get out of high school? If we're not doing what you just mentioned and allowing them to be that person, to restrain ourselves and to trust that they're going to make these decisions, well, you know, I often remind myself, I say, wow, in about 14 months, my daughter's going to be about 9.5 hours away. I hope she can make a good decision. And, what happens for so many of these kids after high school?
When we fix everything, and those helicopter parents, I guess that's what they call it now.
Right,
and this
yeah.
is a generation of, if the school calls or you don't get a good grade, or that you're always fighting that they deserved an A, mainly because sometimes the parents are writing the paper or are a little too involved in the outcome of a project. But when we get so involved with that, because when they go to college, the job of the parent in the college's point of view is, if you're on the hook for paying the bill, then that's your job.
That's your
Pay
job,
the bill. You have nothing else to say about their schedule, their living, and what they do, what time they come home. That's the reality of college.
Yeah.
So when we fix everything in those 4 years in high school, that when they do get to college, they don't know how to fix.
Yeah.
They don't know the feeling the reality of the consequences of their decisions. Because when your professor says, this is unacceptable, I'm not giving you any more time, mom can't call and say, this is
Mom can't give you another chance. So.
Mom can't get you another chance, or dad can't get you another chance.
So, and I think this begs the question, and I think we can kind of both get our arms around this, and unfortunately, but so why is it then, we have so many of these kids who are hitting 18, 19, 20, in that neighborhood, that's where the opiate addiction, the opiate induction goes off the chart.
Yeah.
And I think exactly what you mentioned there is that we let go, and while we're letting go, those 50, 60, or 70 adults that were in the building in that thing called school every day, that were constantly around them, they're gone also.
Yes.
So now suddenly, for the first time in their young lives, at 17 or 18, like it or not, here you go. And I think for a lot of kids, I think that struggle begins there. And I think, unfortunately, I don't think it's a coincidence that the opiates are being tried by kids at that age, 18, 19, 20, at a much, much higher rate. It's happening with the younger kids in increasingly amounts under 18, which is a whole nother conversation. But that large population of 18, 19, 20,
to 25-year-olds, we lose
there's
way
something
too
going
many
on.
of those. Yes, we're losing. And the answer should never be, that's why I allow my kids to drink at my home, so that they're ready for college. No, that's not the answer to the question that we just posed. The answer is to have great strategies and a health policy, so that they know the outcome of what can happen there. It's a constant struggle.
My son was never allowed. I told him, there's no alcohol. 21 is the age. Unfortunately, he died at 21 from an opioid overdose. But you know what? I don't look back on that and say that was a mistake. That was the correct message.
Absolutely.
But I do think that we have to figure out what we're not doing for the segment of kids who don't have the same strategies to handle that transition of completing high school and beginning, whether it's the world of work or a junior college, living at home, or going away to college. Somehow there is a segment of that young adult, transitional age youth that is not graduating with the correct coping skills, or maybe there's some other constitutional deficit that we have to maybe as parents begin to say, okay, where are we in preparing for this next transition? We prepare financially, we prepare by getting them tutoring for the ACTs or the SATs. How are we preparing them emotionally and socially and interpersonally for this next huge transition? And are we underplaying it as a group of parents as a whole? Because I keep going back to it, there's no coincidence that kids are grabbing that drug at right around that age.
There is never a coincidence. There's never a coincidence. And I don't think there's any shame. As parents, these kids are being pushed to exceedingly, perform at such a high level, and still have, I always hear from kids, so from our high schoolers, and I'm supposed to be having the time of my life. I am not having the time of my life.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so let's, dial it back just a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah.
And there's no shame in our children being ready for a junior college where you were a little bit more supported.
Correct.
With a supportive living and environment and being able to transition into going away your last 2 years
Yeah.
of school as opposed to those complete 4 years.
Yeah.
You have to we always have to be met where we are in the moment in time that we're there.
Right. And
It shouldn't be
Right.
grow up and figure it out for
Right.
yourself.
Yeah, and each kid we need to kind of assess
Yeah.
that differently with, and I think also that there's a tendency to kind of, okay, they're at college or they're in college now, and we let go a little bit, and we have to let go a little bit. But I think what I'm seeing more and more of is that we need to hold on a little bit more. It's just holding on in a different way. We're allowing them their autonomy, but we're really kind of really still helping manage them, again, appropriately to where that kid is at in their own development. And I think that, if we can do that for some of these kids who are maybe struggling more emotionally, struggling more socially, interpersonally, and maybe we're not letting them go the same way we let all the kids go,
Right.
we may be able to circumvent some of
Yes.
these kids who jump into unhealthy coping strategies like the opioids.
But, it's scary.
Yeah.
You're always leaving the last school and then you go to the bottom of the barrel again.
Yeah.
The high man on the totem pole to the
The eighth grader
Yeah.
in middle school becomes the freshman in high school.
yes, and you're back to being the low man
sure,
on the totem
sure.
pole.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
we're going to be right back after this message.
First you stole prescription pills from your mom. You threw back a few, and then they were gone. So you're jonesing real bad, yeah, you need some more. So you call a shady guy and say you're looking to score. And that's how you got addicted to heroin. He came over quick, said he got something new. For just $10 you snort or chew. Said just one time and then you'd be fine. But soon you OD'd and now you're dying. And that's how you got addicted to heroin. And that's how you OD'd on heroin.
Yeah, this will make all those bad feelings go away.
I always make things better. I'm like the best friend who's always there.
You know that isn't helping you. What are you talking about?
Don't listen to him. Who's your friend?
He'll be your only friend if you keep that up. But she left me because they left me because
They left you, but I didn't. Is that a friendship or what?
he's the reason they left you, Mark. He didn't want to go anywhere anymore. He just wanted to sit at home and get high.
Don't listen to him, Mark. You're just hallucinating.
And why are you hallucinating? Are you telling me you'd rather isolate yourself in this drug-induced dreamland? Why?
Mark, don't do it. You need
The
me.
only thing you need is you, Mark. The longer you sit at home and shove those things down your throat, the further you slip away from everything.
Mark!
You don't own me.
I'm not a drug addict. I am not in denial. I am in control. Are
you really in control? Help is one call away.
John and I were just talking about transitions, really, high school into college and off camera. When we have high schoolers who are allowed to party a little bit,
Yeah.
whether people want to hear this or not, the emotional, mental, and that capability, their developmental growth is stunted.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they may still be 15
Yeah.
years old mentally in an 18 or 19-year-old body
Yeah.
and away at college.
Yeah. Yeah. Those
So, we are asking a lot, from, we have to do better. We have to just change what we're doing.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, developmentally, when you start using drugs and alcohol at younger ages, developmentally you're delayed socially, interpersonally, emotionally, even your cognitive development. So everything is not up to speed chronologically. And even if it was chronologically, you're going into college sometimes 17 or young
Yeah.
18. That's still so young.
It is so young. It is so young.
Sometimes we're so close to it, we don't realize how young they really are.
Yeah.
Until you see somebody else's 17-year-old and you go, oh, they're a baby, they're young.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But sometimes our children at 18 look adult, but they're not adult. Dr. Delman was here last
Yeah.
week, and I love him.
Yeah, great guy.
And
great guy.
I will probably have to come back to that thought that I was just going to tell you because it went in and out of my mind. So you're familiar with that.
Yep, sure.
Here it is. Even for adults, you go to a wedding on a Sunday night, and perhaps you're not used to drinking, but you overindulge a little bit. Thursday is when you'll be back at your peak mental performance in your workplace.
Right,
That's in
Right.
an adult.
right?
It still mimics in a child that way. They don't now
No.
they don't have the wherewithal
No.
to all of a sudden, come
Yeah.
back with their brains after partying so hard. And let's talk about how our youth is partying now. Tampax soaked in alcohol.
Sure.
In all different orifices for boys and girls. Eyewash glasses,
Sure. Yeah.
bathing their eyes in pure alcohol to be absorbed because their breath doesn't smell. It can't be detected so readily, and they can be, getting drunk in a much different way.
Well, everything is, like we talked about, everything is this journey to alter their consciousness. And once you
Yes.
get into that journey with an unhealthy way of doing it with drugs and alcohol, well, today these are kids of the 21st century.
Yes.
And kids of the 21st century are stimulated in ways that maybe we weren't in the past by all the electronics and all the exposure to all the newest things. They see things happening instantaneously.
Yes.
And so, there's always a constant new twist. Kids are always looking for a different way to get high. And I think if you even look at just the whole trend with the butane hash oil and the wax weed, just under 3 years ago, I treated the first couple of kids I've ever treated for that, and it was relatively unknown. And I began to put together about 30 or 40 PowerPoint slides and began to train and lecture on it. And jaws were dropping, and jaws still drop because it's still something that I'm
I
so
remember
familiar.
the first time I saw that.
Yeah, and now 3 years later, it is so widespread. In under 3 years, the transition, and I talk about this as being extreme THC. There are extreme sports like snowboarding and stuff like that. This is extreme THC. And THC has evolved to such a point that when parents hear marijuana, they're thinking dried out shake brickweed of 1 to
You
2%
roll a joint,
THC from
right.
40 years ago. They're not thinking cannabinoid oils that are 75% THC. They're not thinking butane hash oil or wax that's 80 or 90%.
So they put it in a cylinder.
Right.
put their marijuana in a
They
cylinder.
gotta grind.
Fill it.
They gotta grind up their weed.
Right.
So they'll grind the weed up, put it in there's like a glass tube. You'd see in chemistry class. On one end of it would be a coffee filter, and a rubber band. On the other end of it, a receptacle. And they'd empty a whole can of that butane lighter fluid that you put in the old those Zippo lighters.
Yes. Okay.
So the butane strips the THC off the marijuana. And then what you see dripping through the coffee filter into like a Pyrex dish is butane lighter fluid and pure THC. And then they begin to cook it on a hot plate or a stovetop, very low heat, with a razor blade, and cooking the butane out of it, which is dangerous in itself because you have gas in the air now. Somebody lights a cigarette, but that being said, you're not going to cook all of it out. So there's still going to be butane in there. Butane's a neurotoxin.
Yes.
A neurotoxin meaning it'll kill brain cells, which are non-regenerative. And so now you end up with this gooey substance that's called wax. And wax will look slightly different shades, slightly different textures, depending upon how they cook it out, how long they cook it out for.
Kind of reminds me of, remember when you used to put Elmer's glue and you could ball it then?
Yeah. Like those rubber cement balls.
Yeah,
And you could think of a tiny ball like that, and they'll put those into those vape
E-cigarettes.
pens. Those vape pens or e-cigarettes modified for that. And that is getting kids, I mean, if you think about the weed
One
in this,
little dab
correct.
can last them
Correct.
6 hours.
Yeah. And if you think about the weed in the 70s or 80s being 1, 2, 3% of THC by concentration, and you think of today's weed, which is really strong on average, about almost 11.5%, now let's dial it up to 90%. And these kids are the wheels fall off the cart so quickly when they're smoking this. And
Highly addictive, I would assume, too.
Yes. Well, it really ramps up the progression of addiction and cannabis dependency. And I think what people are not realizing, and you opened this segment with the fact that they're partying in really, really profoundly different and extreme ways, that parents hear marijuana and they think it's the marijuana of yesteryear. It's almost, I keep saying we should be calling it something different because it's not marijuana.
It's not marijuana anymore. It's genetically modified. It's on so many different levels.
Correct.
But our children, like you just said, our thrill was, riding your bike down a hill.
Yeah.
Right? We didn't have all the different gaming.
Right.
Or extreme sports, or the ability to see so many
Yeah.
things happening at the same time.
Right.
They live in a very fast-paced world. And, we can't make excuses because our parents probably said that about us.
Sure.
However, in the age of technology, to get them to have, a really awesome experience in their mind, it's going to be dialed up much bigger than just sharing 3 beers with 9 people behind the school.
Right.
It's bigger, it's got to be harder, it's got to be faster, and it needs to be...
It's got to be something so good that we can put it into a Snapchat video.
Exactly right.
Right?
Or
so,
YouTube
so
video.
We've got to make it so good that now when we film it, we show how hard we were partying.
Yes.
And the reality is, if everything else that you just described and living as a teenager in this day and age is so amped up, so ramped up, what makes us think that the partying and the drug use isn't going to be ramped up as well in comparison to what it was?
When you think about your well-adjusted teenager who you think is a very smart young person, goes to a party and puts their hand in a bowl full of pills and then just takes whatever they put out without knowing what it is, reason goes out of their brains because they are not adults.
Right.
They're not adults.
Right.
As much as you want them to think, when you say to them, what were you thinking? They weren't thinking.
Well,
because their brain is not fully developed yet.
I think this is just another way to kind of exclamation point the fact when you said the happy, well-adjusted teenager. This is exactly why there are no longer those boundaries that were not firm boundaries, but that decades past there were certain segments of the student population that were more prone to use drugs and alcohol than others. And we used to have these little clique names for them, whatever they were, the jocks and the preps and whatever the case was back then, right? Whatever you called them. But today, all those little subsections of the student body, they're all using.
Yes.
And there's a reason for that. It means that substance use has become more acculturated, more normalized to young
Yes.
people than ever before.
Correct?
Than ever before. Right down to the point that heroin can be seen as a social drug now, not a drug that we would never use. Because now it has been brought down in a young person's eyes, no different than when people were partying and going to clubs in the late 70s and sniffing a line of coke, and it was this social status drug. And now they're seeing sniffing a line of coke, a bump of dope, it's sniffing. You're not a real addict, right?
Right.
And so
I can
so the
stop this
perce-
anytime
so the
I want.
Yeah, so the perception of danger has dropped so dramatically for young people, and that's why heroin has become so easily skipped over to now that it never was prior to this last generation of young people. So this,
And
this
we have to identify that, you know, and from my son, that first time that you use heroin, it's a high like no other high.
Yeah.
And then they constantly chase that feeling.
correct.
And they have to use more, and they're always wanting to get back to that first time use.
Yeah, they're always chasing it, and it was Mike Delman that actually, Dr. Delman, that actually said to me a recent study that 1 in 4 people that try heroin,
So 25%.
that first time use is the beginning of their progression to addiction. Meaning that 1 in 4 people, if they try heroin, are on their way to that road to being addicted to it. That it has that type of profound effect on you, you know, and obviously I think neurochemically that it begins that. And I believe that, and in first person, forget about all the kids I've worked with, but in my own child, you know, his representation was something he just thought he was going to check out. You know, in
Just
that
gonna try it
18-year-old mind,
once.
check it out. You know, wasn't, you know, to that prior point about seen as just another social drug, something in the realm of people partying and trying different things.
Nobody
experimenting.
uses that and is looking to
No.
become an addict.
And you know what?
And that's the main message that I really, nobody
Yeah.
uses marijuana, alcohol, heroin, and expects to become,
Don't plan on it.
right.
You don't plan on being an addict.
No.
And I think, you know.
Our kids didn't wake up one
No.
day and say, you know
No.
what, in 3 years, I'm going to be dead and I'm going to destroy my family, and
Yeah.
I'm good with that decision.
Right.
Said no,
No.
one ever.
You know, and I think, you know, unfortunately, like, he was one of those 23% that
Yes.
he was the 1 in 4. He wouldn't have known that. And I think that that's the message that I just keep pounding home with parents is, you know what? If you look at us, we have loving families.
Yes.
Perfectly. Last time I checked, we're pretty normal people, and you know, and it happened to us.
It happened to us, and what I
it's-
equate it to is, to parents, would you load a handgun with 4 bullets and let your kid hold it to their head and pull the trigger? If you're not willing to do that, then
Yeah.
you better have the conversation and
Yeah.
have a health policy with drugs and drinking.
Yeah, and that's the bottom line, and it doesn't get
That is
simpler
the
than
bottom.
that.
It doesn't get any simpler than that.
I think where the next level of this conversation gets a little bit cloudy for these parents is, and all parents, is the marijuana piece.
Yeah.
Because you know what? I don't know.
I agree with you. It should be called something
Yeah,
different.
if we called it-
it's not innocuous. It's not any of those.
No,
none of those work.
Listen, the pot today is hardly the pot of 40, 50 years ago. You know, maybe 40, 50 years ago, in hindsight, it's a plant, it's natural. You know, maybe when it was like 0.5% THC, whatever, maybe that was more truer, but nothing could be further from the truth
Yeah.
in 2017. It's the other end of the spectrum. And I think, you know, this is the challenge because I don't know a lot of other industries the same way a lot of parents don't know my industry. And unfortunately, there's a lot of parents' last encounter with marijuana was maybe when they were in high school 30 or 40 years ago.
Right.
So their historic recall is something that was more benign. And, you know, let's face it, kids weren't landing in drug treatment in the 70s and 80s for chronic or regular marijuana smoking. They are today.
They are today.
They are today.
They are
And there's
today.
a reason for that.
Yeah.
There's a reason why the DSM-5 never had cannabis withdrawal symptomology in it before, but it's there today.
So is that a
It's-
diagnostic
That's a
code?
diagnostic statistical manual that therapists and doctors and school social workers, when they come up with all these disorders, they're coded and they give a cluster of symptomology. Well, the symptomology for withdrawal from cannabis was never in there in the prior 4 editions.
But
It's there
I have
today.
worked with parents who, and their kids are only smoking pot. They don't go to school anymore. They don't want to go to school anymore. They're withdrawn from the family. They withdraw from all activities that used to bring them joy. They're only focused on smoking pot. That's called an addiction. They are not going to continue on to college if that goes unchecked.
Correct.
They are not going to go on to becoming productive adults and raising a family and buying a home and all
Right.
those expectations that as parents
We want to see for
our
them.
children to
Sure.
achieve.
Yeah.
They're not going to do that.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
always comes back to what is allowed and what is not allowed.
Yeah. Yeah. And ultimately, as parents, we're never going to be able to control the outcome.
Correct.
But we can always control our response. And, you know,
And it's our job to throw roadblocks in.
Absolutely.
Let's be honest.
Yeah.
It's our job to get in the way
As
of
much-
decisions that we know are not in their best interest.
right, right. And, you know, I think it's another interesting piece, too, that what you talked about, that, well, they're smoking or they're this. No, it's still a problem. You know, I see this very often where kids are trying to fight back from a substance addiction, but they smoke weed or they drink because they've given up that other drug. So they've given up, maybe they're doing really well with the opioids. And maybe, you know, and this, you know, and I'll, again, bare my soul, this was the case with my son, very well with the opioids, but he was still having beers with his friends. Now he's 21, they're playing video games. Well, for his friends, it really wasn't an issue. They were 21 years old, they were of age, and that was their choice. And like I told him, your brain needs to heal.
Yes.
I says, and his failure to really embrace right living was his downfall. And I say this to all parents who are struggling with this right now, that if your kid is battling back from an opioid addiction, they're trying to get back on track, this idea that they can drink or they can smoke is not okay. And I understand also because I couldn't, it was out of my control,
Right.
but I never gave the messages okay, and I gave all the information in the world why it wasn't okay. And that's what you want to continue to do, because once you make it okay, you're just going to speed up the process of relapse
Yes.
back to the opioids.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, you know, and that's just a fact. It's
Yeah.
factual now.
Yeah.
Listen, in the news right now, Penn State, the hazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you want to believe that all college students, while drinking, are in their right minds, they left this young man to die.
Yep. Yeah.
Just like Natalie Chiappa
Yes.
in 2008.
2008. Yeah. June.
Just
2008.
an A student, beautiful young woman,
Mm.
cheerleader, 18 years old. They cleaned up a party in a garage while she lay dying on the floor, and they all left.
Yeah.
Now we'll go into college,
Yeah.
and that's still happening, hazing.
Yeah.
Now, there was a young man who wanted to fit in. He wanted to fit in.
Desperately too.
Desperately
Right?
wanted to fit in. So there's the social angst,
Yeah.
and I will do anything because I'm not, you know,
Yeah.
I'm not that person to
Yeah.
stand up against my peers.
Yeah.
And then my peers were so out of their minds or under the influence
Yeah.
that they left this young man to die. And that's great. So we're going to institute this, that, you know, A, B, C, D. That young man's still dead, and his family will mourn.
Yeah.
And a group of young men have to deal with the consequences of the decision that they made that will haunt them for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
So
and I think,
all of these things leave such an indelible mark on a soul.
But yeah, and you backed into a great point. So we went in about 3 minutes or less from the opiates to the alcohol.
Yeah.
And
They
both
walk
of them,
hand
both
in
of-
hand.
both of them will get you to the same place, which
Yes.
would be dead, right? And I think
Alcohol will take a little
Yeah.
bit longer.
yeah, and I think what people have to understand is, like, you know, when they're going off to college, they're still very young, and some developmentally or emotionally younger than others. And suddenly this kind of burst of freedom
Yes.
is handed to them. How are we preparing them for that freedom? How are we preparing them to make those decisions? How are we preparing them to know that when they're around that there's going to be nobody tapping them on the shoulder, telling them what to do?
The other thing that I would, suggest to parents is, if your child in high school has made the decision to be drug and drink free, look for a college that has a sober dorm.
Yeah, yeah.
Because it's okay for them to be surrounded by people who are walking the same road that they are walking, without fear of ridicule or fear of, or having so much pressure to put upon you to indulge in other people's bad behaviors when you're not strong enough to say no.
Yeah. And especially since peers are the primary radius of the primary circle of concern for young people, that if they've got sober peers in a sober environment around them, then the pull to do the right thing, that's
much greater.
You've witnessed that at Outreach House. That's the magic, that those are kids who were all doing the wrong thing. Now it's popular to do the right thing. And so Outreach is the peer pressure.
Always strength in numbers.
Yes.
So when I am with my friends that walk the same way that I walk, I don't care what other people are saying about me, because I still have my friends.
Right.
And let's talk about social media.
Yeah.
So when you're the one that's being posted on social media out to hundreds, thousands, in their world, that I'm the outcast, that I'm the one that won't try this, and being ridiculed in a social media atmosphere, how does that make me feel?
Yeah.
Which, and all roads take us down very dark paths.
Yeah.
Because suicide is up in young people.
Yeah.
It's when I don't fit in, and I have that.
Well, and you mentioned social media. I think it's an important conversation to have with young people, because there's more and more kids becoming depressed acutely over social media, because they're always people are posting themselves at parties, at social events. They're posting all these wonderful pictures of themselves that look like they have the life that nobody else has.
Correct.
And then young people are sitting there looking at that, and then they're looking at themselves, and they're becoming depressed by that. And what we need to translate for them as adults is that person taking that picture, sometimes as soon as the camera's down,
they feel exactly the way you feel.
They feel the very same way. And what you're being shown is the 10 o'clock news highlight reel.
Yes.
You're looking at that young person's highlight reel, and you're comparing it against your everyday life. And of course, your life may seem more depressing than that person's highlight reel. So what do we need to do as parents? We need to decode that posting. We need to decode this message for young people. We need to get them to understand that, listen, all that glitters isn't gold. And unfortunately right now, we're beginning to get data that's showing that young people, they're feeling depressed when they're seeing these images of other people, in having this extremely looking like a wonderful life while they're just maybe, not enjoying that same social popularity or that same social connectedness. So we really have to help them more than ever, because they're on these things. I don't know how often I've seen this,
goodness.
But if we're not helping them with this, then we're really missing great opportunity.
Because they really do believe, just like adults, when you get those letters at Christmas time about what an amazing year, your friends that you don't see at all time, those letters are depressing to people that receive them.
Yeah.
But you're not getting the full picture.
Right.
And when people are criticizing other people or feel the need to make their life bigger than what it is, they're really unhappy people.
Yeah.
I recognize that.
Yeah.
And, for me, in my world, I don't really care what anybody else thinks about me, because I know my reality.
Well, this is the defense for the young people right now with the social media. It's this reaction formation. Remember, as a kid, you used to say, "Step on the sidewalk, step on the crack, break your mother's back." So what did we do? we stepped way over the crack,
Yes.
not to step on it. That was that reaction formation, right? So what are these kids doing now? Well, I want to make sure that I'm seen as like popular or having, you know,
They
doing
know
something
that
cool. So
they
they
will
go
take-
out of their way
yes.
to post this stuff.
They will take 60 pictures of themselves to get just that right
Oh,
selfie.
yeah.
That's a lot of minutes taken
Yeah.
out of their life
Yeah.
to get the right image
Yeah.
that they want to portray to the world.
Yeah.
You know, there's so much focus on that.
Yeah. And you know, and there's part of that is, you know, developmentally you get it, but at which point does it go from developmentally
becomes
appropriate to
excessive.
problematic?
Yes. It becomes
And that's where we
excessive.
always want to try and kind of get our sense
Right.
of where are they in that. Yeah, there is a lot about body image and there's a lot about, you know, self-concept as an adolescent. But when does it go from developmentally appropriate to
Our
problematic?
good friend Kim Laube always says, you know, they do know how to take that perfect selfie.
Yeah.
And as parents, as teachers, as all people involved in a young person's life, it's easy to say, well, you need
Yep.
to have better self-confidence. You need to have better self-esteem, but we're not showing them how
Yeah.
to build those muscles
Yeah.
to have that.
Yeah.
You know, it's easy to say you should have it, but they're children. How do they get it?
But yeah, well, the 80s was the feel-good generation. Feel good about yourself.
Yes.
And then what the 90s and the emergence of resiliency and the research showed us is, no, you can't tell them to feel good about themselves. They need to be provided meaningful opportunities
To feel good
to
about
feel
themselves.
good about themselves.
Yes.
Right? And you're right.
And
what-
it's still true today.
Yes, and what's so again, going back to these transitions that we opened the show with, if we go back to the elementary school kids going to middle school and the middle school kids going to high school and this summer gap that's right around the corner, and what are going to be the meaningful opportunities for the children of the viewers of the show today
To feel
good about
about
themselves,
themselves.
because that's the protective
And
factor.
how and having the conversation to speak to them about any anxiety or angst that
Yeah.
they're going to have there.
Yeah.
You know, and we're not trying to criticize or beat
No,
up anybody.
no.
We've learned.
We've learned.
We've learned.
We've learned,
So it's just
so.
us sharing
Yep.
what we're doing. Next week, we are actually going to take a trip over to Outreach House and hopefully talk with some of the kids just to show you how easily their decision-making process, went to using drugs and alcohol. So, stay tuned for that piece. And we really need to build some big muscles to get our children really to a healthy age of 25.
Yeah.
Have a great week. Happy Mother's Day to all the moms that are celebrating, and a special heartfelt for all the moms that are going to have an empty chair at the table. You know what that feels like, but try to remember, that life is still good with the other ones that are surviving, and that your loved one still is right there next to you. I know that, I feel that, and do your best. Be kind to yourself that day. Have a great weekend.